Well, we're here, 9 a.m., day 3 of a 3-day conference. I hope most of you are awake and have the appropriate Advil or Tylenol based upon your activities last night. So a couple of housekeeping items. One, we will be taking questions through the app. So if you have questions that come up during the Q&A, please jump into the app, ask the questions, and then we will look to get those answered. If you have questions in the room, we will ask that you come up to the microphone and ask them so that the people watching the stream can actually have that, and we have it for the recordings as well. So I don't want to take any of these guys' time. With that, I would like to introduce Ryan from HYPR and Ludwig from Yubico. Thank you.
We'll let you go ahead, Ludwig.
All right, I'll get started. So thanks for being here. I'm Ludwig with Yubico. I'm a senior product manager on the Yubico side, and with me I got Ryan Rowcliffe out of HYPR. We're here to talk about some how you balance enhanced security and user experience in an enterprise. We'll talk through some of the learnings we've seen working together in partnerships and what we've seen also separately.
For an agenda one, thank you for being here this morning. I'm pretty sure everybody had a good time last night. At least that was the evidence I saw from the bar. So I am quite happy to see some faces. For our agenda, we're going to cover a couple of topics. We have the enterprise user challenges as well as user authentication journeys. It seems to be a pretty big topic. I've seen quite a bit of a pattern of this through the last 3 days at this conference to this week. And then general authentication journeys as well as how we look at authentication approaches in association to the enterprise and the users themselves. So it'd be a high-level process outline. If we move on to, since you got the clicker, my friend. Oh, you
Sorry.
want me?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, we'll do a little handoff. That was smooth. So let's cover some enterprises and user challenges. This was a little entertaining as we were putting the slide deck together, and then we looked at Monday, Tuesday, and now obviously we're here on Wednesday morning. How many news article slides have we seen? Are we up to like 15, 20 at the conference? So we're not going to spend too much time. It's just, once again, evidence of we're here to solve a problem, and I think we all know what that problem is. This number has been a little bit different between whoever's giving a talk. Some have a reference to 68%. Some have reference to 80%. I can give you references to 83%. Let's pick whatever report we want to come from. Either way, 68% still an astronomical number. It also depends on how the users are compromising and or leveraging those credentials. To associate some numbers, Monday in, I think that track over there in Sol 1, there was a lot of ROI discussions. So this will kind of pivot a little bit off of what the average costs are for things. I do recommend to take a look at some of the other ROI talks. We did have Mr. Hickman from HYPR giving a great talk on that. There's calculators and things in which can help orchestrate and or give justification for some of these things. But one of the most common things that we hear for password resets is it's self-service password reset. Users call the help desk. In essence, this is still a cost to our business. And it's actually quite sad that we're still talking about this because about 15 years ago, I sold a self-service password reset tool. And I'm hopeful that we can actually finally get to the point to decommission that world. The other numbers here, which is specifically the 70% of IT support calls are still help desk, or I mean, are still password resets, apologies. That's not a pattern that's changed either, right? This is still a very large number focused on credentials and users having problems with authenticating. And we can also assume that those are just password resets. They're not necessarily MFA resets. About 11 hours in total time lost per year, as well as the average security spend per employee on this is about $2,700. And that's pretty decent numbers. We start adding all that up, and we want to go to our businesses and say, hey, we want to take on a password or a passwordless project, or we want to do a passkey deployment. We actually have some numbers to help the business understand why there's value for them, because I don't know how many of you who've talked to your business owners, they don't really respond until you give them dollar amounts. They don't necessarily fully will take a leap into a project unless they see an ROI. So challenges, I'll kick it off and then you can go ahead and take some of it because I'm pretty sure I've already put some people to sleep. So how many of us all agree humans are a challenge? Yes, great, we got interaction. There's people in the room. Pretty much what we have to do to facilitate that is we do need to minimize disruption to what those users are. If we know, I'm pretty sure we all agree, like, hey, whatever change we do put on a user, it has to be the most minimal change. How many people have changed the login dialog box on a web app and then got phone calls about it? Yeah. So that is just evidence of what we have to do to drive adoption for these things. And as well as consider direct and indirect costs. When we make these changes, when we go through any of these alterations, what is the actual downstream cost that might be impacted? When we did change that login dialog, actually how much cost was associated to that? There could be obviously a wealth of support calls or even just the verbal assault from users. I'll give it to you since I've been talking this whole time and
All right.
these guys are a little...
Let's see if I can put them to sleep. So let's talk about like what we mean by a user authentication journey here and like what does it actually mean? There we go. So basically what we're talking about is onboarding, how to set up a user with an account and teaching them how to use it and then making them use that on a daily basis. But you also have that recovery story, whatever that recovery is. And then finally, when they offboard for whatever reason, you need to take care of that for various reasons. But before we do that, like, let's take a proper step back and like, what do we actually care about? Who actually cares about authentication? Except for us in this room, the four of us. We care a lot about this. But for a normal end user, they don't really do that. They spend, it's like taking the train to work or some other thing that takes them to where they want to be. And the way I see about it, and it's really important that we remember this when we design this. And the way I see it is sort of the taking the train to work. This is or used to be my train to go to work. It's the famous Caltrain that goes from San Francisco all the way down to San Jose. Maybe some of you have seen it, some of you have taken it. It is horrible. It is a diesel train from, I believe, the 60s. It is so bumpy that you have to, in certain sections, brace yourself, hold your laptop to do any sort of work on it. It's so noisy, I had to buy noise-canceling headphones to even like get some sort of relaxation on it. But you get used to it. Like, it is what I had to do to go to work, and it's the same as entering a 16-digit password to log in. You kind of get used to it, and there's not really anything you can do about it. But there is if you are actually in control of this. And what Caltrain did is that they introduced another train, actually like 2 weeks ago, that is now quiet, it's electric, I can sit down on a desk and work for an hour without my headphones. And that is a better user experience that the user did not really know about and couldn't do anything about it, but is now creating happier users and safer users and gets them to work more reliably because God forbid that train would break at least once a week.
They went from passwords to passkeys.
They did, pretty much. So once you sort of have that mindset, like you have to then start looking at who are you in an organization. You have so many different types of users, and you have to identify all of them. That takes different modes to work. Some of them has to take a train, some of them cannot take a train. And then you identify them and then probably start with your key privileged users, and then you move on to then complete the entire workforce and even end customers.
Real quick, is there anybody has anything that might not be on that slide list of, is there any persona that you would call out that's not up there? Pop quiz at 9 in the morning, I got you. Yeah? All right. Yeah, there's a lot of varieties. There's an extensive amount of varieties in user personas. We'll switch over to that. I don't know how I ended up with the slides having like all the numbers on it.
Yeah, you're a numbers guy.
Yeah, I'm not a numbers guy.
I'm trying to make you a numbers guy.
So one of the things that we were talking about is, as well as that, all right, well, we're going to make user journeys better. We need to make user journeys better. We need to have a change in disruption. The one thing that has happened, and I think all of us here who participated in FIDO quite some time, have seen the rise of biometrics and adoption of biometrics. How many people remember when like iPhone's first Touch IDs made it and Android finally brought Touch ID, and we had a whole bunch of pushback and nobody was going to trust those devices with their biometrics. And now it's pretty much a default standard, like everybody who has a mobile device. All right, that's too much of a generalization. There are other countries where some people have more budgeted devices that don't have biometrics on them yet. But in essence, it is a global initiative. This is where the whole market has gone. This is what users are going to become used to, as well as we have a younger generation that's coming up that only knows life on digital devices. So these numbers all start showing evidence of, once again, biometrics are going to be leading the way on how we're going to cover some form of authentication. And then 72% of biometrics prefer, 72% of users prefer biometrics over other authentication methods. God, this is only 9:10 in the morning. This kind of goes back to, once again, if our users are more comfortable and have been using biometrics in their day-to-day life with all their apps, with their devices at home, this is going to make it easier for the enterprise to start driving some form of adoption. And this one is where we're advocating for the hardware security key side of things, right? The one thing from a HYPR's perspective is we're authenticator agnostic, but there is plenty of use cases that would dictate a hardware security key. One thing that we did not have until recently was a biometric on key, and that was something that a lot of businesses were starting to ask for. And once again, if our users are used to using some form of biometric to authenticate on a device, bringing a security key with a biometric on it makes life simple, and it's also something they can easily adopt. It doesn't take a lot of education, it doesn't take a lot of training. And it is actually more secure, as well as extremely scalable for the IT teams. And I think we're kicking it over to you on this one.
Yes, I believe we are.
If we rehearsed, we'd probably be a little bit smoother in our transitions.
Or we're meant to do this. Who knows? No one knows except for us. But and another approach is sort of like once you identified like who you are, you also need to identify what you have and how you, if you're okay with certain things in certain places. You're going to have all these types of things that you have to manage in an enterprise. Some of them will help you and some of them will not help you. Like if you look at the IDPs and the CMS and solutions, they will help you on your journey of managing this and providing a better user experience, whether that is for the onboarding or for the offboarding. And like a theme of it is sort of like centralizing it and knowing what you have and doing inventory, which is some of the things that like the HYPR is doing well and others, a lot of other vendors are doing here. They provide you with a better user experience. That for all these various reasons that we will see in a second, which is this onboarding, the authentication, the logging, and the recovery. And looking back at the train analogy, the onboarding is how do you provision that train card to the user so that they can take that train in the morning and pay for it. Daily authentication is just like how you get on that train. And also make that simple. You don't want to look at the track number every morning. You want to have it on the same track number. You want to have it at the same time. Just minimize, make it as dull and simple as possible. Again, we love authentication, users don't care. And then finally, recovery. What happens when something goes wrong? You need to come back, usually that is to the onboarding, but there's a number of other recovery paths, like what happens if the first authentication method fails? We talk about it in a second. And then finally, there's a logging piece. Which
yeah, we were talking about it a little bit just before we got up here, and how important logging really is, but it's really no longer just logging. Logging is technically, for us, our signals, right? Not only is it just the user behavior we have to look at, but there's also a lot of security benefits as well as maybe user preference benefits that we can extract from logging, right? So as we gear towards what we get for the enterprise for user experience, there's two really big aspects for logging, which is going to be that insight for signals, risk, as well as how well adopted are the users when they're deploying and leveraging, say, biometric authenticators, either on security keys, mobile apps, or cards. Recovery, well, we have a little bit of time to spend on the next ones, which is the process, so we can hang out on those. But for those who had to listen to me on Monday, apologies you're listening to me again today, but onboarding is a pretty critical part. We sit here and we talk about how great passkeys are, and they are amazing, they are going to change the world, but they are such critical components. How are we truly onboarding a user and truly know that that physical identity belongs to that digital identity? Right? This is going to kind of hint more towards the IDV side, but we also have to make that process extremely easy for users, because if we go all the way back to the beginning of the slides that we were going through, user change is terrible for users. They don't like change, and we've got to make it so simple and easy for them or else the onboarding efforts are going to become that indirect cost that we're all going to sit here saying, we screwed up and we didn't get the adoption we wanted. So onboarding is becoming one of the probably more primary pivots for focus right now on getting passkeys into environments, as well as any security keys or any other authenticators. It has to be that smooth experience for those users. Right? And I'll advocate that a lot of automation with IDV vendors, HYPR ourselves to do this, making it extremely easy for users to just get their own credentials and take the burden away from the IT teams as well, right? Having IT teams having to manage all of the credentials, this is something that we have to get away from as well. So not only is it a user experience great for the end users, preferably I'm pretty sure there's plenty of help desk and IT admins that don't want to be managing credentials on that level as well. It's not so fun. So onboarding is a pretty critical part of this process.
Yeah, no, and on that note, it's really important to ensure that you do all the different credential setups, whatever they may be, at one time. It's a great recipe for user dissatisfaction. If they do set up one credential and then a few weeks later they have to go back and do it, or even hours later, it's just like terrible. That's a recipe for disaster. So do it all in one-stop shop.
I agree. Hit them all at once, get it over with, rip the Band-Aid off.
And then finally, like your user authentication, we already touched upon this, I'll repeat myself, but just make it easy, simple. It should be super easy to do the right thing, but it should also be super easy to do the right thing when they fail on that first time. If you talk about biometrics, you will always have issues with biometrics at one point. You cut your finger, we start wearing face masks, so Face ID doesn't work, or you just have you shaved and that for some reason changed it. You will have that at some point for each user. Then you have to make sure that there's a simple path for them to enter a PIN. That's typically the path in the biometric flow. But also if they forgot their security key, if they forgot their phone, their smart card, whatever, they need to have a second way of getting in that isn't a help desk call. We have to have a method before the help desk call to minimize that disruption and also drastically reduce the cost for that user.
You covered it all. We don't need to belabor that one.
Yep.
I think this is a really good one for you guys, for you to cover as well. But as I said, the HYPR perspective and how we look at authenticators is we're very much authenticator agnostic. So we do need to have support for things like a mobile phone or mobile app, a smart card, security keys, and I know we have a lovely little break glass item on here. And if you guys remember. If you were part of FIDO well before passkeys, like the standard statement was that you would have 2 security keys if you wanted to go passwordless, right? So whether it be two instances of a mobile app or you would go get 2 physical keys. You take one and then you take the other and you stick it in a safe, right? That was more or less our recommendation. And there's still some components to that today, depending on what the use cases are. If we go back to this long-winded slide that had all the different personas, maybe you do need to force an on-device passkey for your PAM use cases, right? There's a definite possibility that you would need to do that within your organization. That means you would need multiple authenticators in that regard, right? And what that solves right out of the box is we get to take the break glass out of the equation because we already have 2 different type of authenticators that cover the use cases. No longer do I think we have to spend time with the break glass. Every time I get on calls with people and they're like, well, what's the break glass solution? Do we just type in a password? I'm like, no, that is never the break glass going forward. We need to stop and get away from that. Granted, we do have legacy components. We can all make references to I-series mainframes and AS400s. The tech's not there, but we'll leave that for a whole different talk.
Yeah, and on that, like, once you've in a state where you've replaced authentication, password authentication with secure passkeys or whatever in a better state, your attackers will go away from trying to break your authentication flow and just go straight to your recovery flow. That's what they will do. It's just so much simpler. So that break glass got to make sure you do it properly. You go back to like IDV if you ideally, so that you know that it is the right user that you then provision these new passkeys to. Otherwise, you will have a huge security risk that will not be very nice.
Offboarding, so we usually don't talk a lot about offboarding. The one benefit, I don't know if you've all seen with passkeys, is when you offboard a passkey, you just basically revoke a public key. Life's quite simple. Now, I mean, I couldn't make it any more simplified for an IAM program because technically you have most likely another product in there like a Savient or a SailPoint that has entitlements and everything else. But in the end, the only thing you technically have to do is revoke that public key and access is gone. Versus how many people have got password sprawl, multiple controllers, multiple systems sitting out there. So there's two benefits to that in my opinion. One is making it simple for admins to manage and have insight over. A simple one command in essence to revoke that public key, and users are basically kicked out of the systems and your systems are more secure. That's pretty much all really you have to do in offboarding. I'm pretty sure if we have HR in here, they'll give us a whole other story of legal and other components that you have to follow. But from a technical aspect, the only thing you really need to do is wipe out that public key.
Yep. And with this, we're going to wrap it up, but some key takeaways, if you did stay awake for this, map out your steps carefully. Like do a proper inventory when you start. And then another thing we didn't really touch upon that much, but is perform multiple and increasing sizes of pilots. Start with your 50 users, learn from that, go to 100, go to 200. You don't want to go to a 1,000-person rollout and then realize that you had some issues with documentation or you could have built your flow better or you needed another component. Solve that problem when you have 100 users doing it.
Yeah, that would go into the indirect costs,
Exactly.
side effects, right?
Exactly. Use biometrics when you can, and then ensure that you have that backup and recovery story sorted out to minimize that disruption and cost. And finally, leverage your vendors. Vendors are really helpful. We're here to help you. We've seen this multiple times with multiple organizations of different kinds. Good vendors, there's a ton of them out there. We're here to help.
Two of them standing up here right now.
Yeah. So yeah, with that, I think that's a wrap.
Yeah. We wrapped that up. We did it on time. We only have 2 minutes left for questions.
It's like we rehearsed.
It's like we did this.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So speaking of questions, I have none from the app. Anybody want to ask something in the room? Or we can give a few more minutes to that coffee break in between sessions.
Don't blame me for not having questions.
No, it was just that well done that everyone had all
I'm
their
going with,
questions
I can't
answered.
believe I pulled this off. I'm still sleeping. So.
That's good. All right. Well, thank you all for coming.